You know, some stories just refuse to die. We're about to dive into one that's over 400 years old, but somehow it feels more chilling than ever. Let's talk about the brutal, unforgettable tale of Peter Stump, a man who would go down in history as the Werewolf of Bedburg.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The year's 1589. We're in a small town in the German countryside, and a man named Peter Stump is about to be publicly, and I mean gruesomely, executed. This event was so shocking it was destined to become the stuff of legend.
And the charges against him? Wow, they were almost beyond belief. We're talking decades of murder, accusations of sorcery, and even, get this, making a pact with the devil himself.
But here's the thing. The real question isn't just about whether he did it or not. It's, why are we still talking about this? Why has this one story survived for centuries? Why can't we forget the Werewolf of Bedburg? Let's figure it out.
To really get this myth, you first have to understand the world that created it. And let me tell you, it was a world of absolute, terrifying chaos.
So Peter Stump's trial happened smack in the middle of this devastating conflict called the Cologne War. For about 6 years, the whole region was just plunged into this brutal, lawless state. Mercenary armies were roaming the countryside, not getting paid, just looting and killing whoever they wanted. It was a complete and total breakdown of society.
You know, there's actually a sociological term for this exact situation, anomie. It's this state of normlessness, where all the rules, all the moral codes that hold a community together, they just completely dissolve. That was the world Peter Stump was living in. And this is where the lines start to blur in a really fascinating way. To the terrified locals, these brutal soldiers weren't just acting like wolves. In their minds, they pretty much were wolves. The monster was already real, walking among them. So in this climate of absolute chaos and fear, the authorities needed to do something, anything, to look like they were in control. And Peter Stump? Well, he was the perfect scapegoat. He was a wealthy farmer, and he had ties to the Protestant side of the war, which was the losing side. So his execution wasn't just about justice. It was this huge political spectacle. It was a way to take all that random, scary chaos of war and give it a single, local face they could destroy.
But see, to make this story really stick, they needed more than just a man. They needed a monster. And every good monster story needs a powerful evil artifact at its center, right?
Under torture, Stump confessed to something absolutely extraordinary. He claimed the devil himself had given him a magic belt, this girdle, that let him transform into a wolf whenever he wanted. And that detail, that was the key. Now it wasn't just a man committing these awful crimes. It was a supernatural force at work.
And this really gives us two totally different ways of looking at this belt. Back in 1589, it was seen as a tool of devolution, a demonic object that could literally turn a man back into a beast. But if you look at it from a modern, psychological point of view, the belt is basically a fiction. It's a way to rationalize violence and, most importantly, to externalize all that guilt.
You know, the philosopher Nietzsche actually had a concept for this. He called it the pale criminal. It's this idea that a criminal literally can't face their own dark urges, what he called the thirst for the knife. So what do? They invent an external reason, a story, like a magic belt, to make sense of what they've done.
The magic belt becomes the perfect psychological fiction. It lets Stump shift all the blame. It's not me, it's not my choices, it was the belt, the devil, the magic. It made me do it. He's literally placing the evil outside of himself.
And here's the kicker. It wasn't just Stump who needed to push that evil outside. The entire community needed it too, maybe even more desperately than he did.
So I want you to really think about this for a second, because it gets right to the heart of why this story is still around. Which of these two possibilities is actually more terrifying?
So, on one hand, you've got a supernatural monster. It's horrifying, for sure, but once you defeat it, the community is safe again. The horror has an external cause, and critically, it has an end. But what's the alternative? The monster is just a man, your neighbor, a father. If that's true, then the horror is inescapable. It means anyone is capable of these things. It means the evil comes from inside us.
And that is the engine that has kept this story running for 400 years. It is psychologically safer. It's almost a relief to believe in a magic belt and a deal with the devil. Because the alternative, that a normal person, someone you know, could do these things, is just too much for a community to handle. We have this deep-seated psychological need to externalize evil.
And this need is what makes the werewolf story so incredibly adaptable. It's like a blank canvas that every generation can use to paint a picture of its own unique, deepest fears.
It's really fascinating to see how the story gets remixed over time. For some, it becomes this philosophical parable about a Nietzschean Superman who breaks free from society's rules. For others, it's a dark Faustian tale of alchemy and magic. And in other versions, the werewolf isn't even real. It's just a convenient excuse, a cloak for fear, prejudice, and social control. The monster just adapts to fit whatever we're anxious about.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought. Maybe the reason we need these stories about magic belts and pacts with the devil is to protect ourselves from a much darker truth. Because if the monster isn't supernatural, if it's just the human condition reacting to trauma and violence, well then the horror isn't out there in the woods. It's in here, with us, always. And that is something truly inescapable.